Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Historia Politica Pública. This will be the third and last episode about Peter Kropotkin and his book Mutual Aid. In the first two episodes I spoke about the main ideas of his book, the life of Kropotkin, who was a prince in Russia, and after he was exiled, was living in Switzerland, in France, in London, and he died in Russia when he came back after the Russian Revolution 1917. There were 100,000 people in his funeral. It is being said that for 1 mile you could see people paying homage not just to Kropotkin but also to the idea of anarchism that he was key to develop. And also there was a criticism of the Russia, of the authoritarian regime that was being developed at that time. So it kind of, the burial of Kropotkin served as a kind of new beginning, a huge movement that was grouped towards the idea that there was needed a society without state in order to create an egalitarian system. So yes, I wanted to focus in this episode in the 8th chapter of Kropotkin, in which he speaks about the contemporary world when he was writing, which this book was published in 1902. So this is titled Mutual Aid Amongst Ourselves, and he points this idea of the labor unions as a kind of continuation from his idea of the guilds in the medieval societies, the mutual aid that was developed by the barbarians and savages, as he called them, the people that was born in the primitive societies, as he refers to them, and also the mutual aid and collaboration that he saw among animals, non-human animals, when he was in Siberia. All that was in a context where the idea of social Darwinism was expanding across society. There were people like Thomas Huxley and others who believed that Charles Darwin was advocating for a kind of individualistic approach towards the evolution, whereas Kropotkin and others advocate for a more inclusive idea that all the species had to collaborate among themselves in order to survive against nature. When Kropotkin refers to nature, he used the capital letter N in order to refer to the inclemencies like the rain, the snow, the extreme hot, and so on. So the key to understand a Kropotkin work is that he believes that humans are not bad by nature, and from then on, this is the foundational myth from Rousseau and Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes believed that the humans are brutish, are nasty, and in constant state of war, and henceforth they need the state in order to kind of establish a social contract to create a system of peace among them. Otherwise, they will be killing each other all the time. Whereas Rousseau believed the opposite idea, that everybody was humanly good from the beginning. However, it was society that had corrupted the ideas, the kind of customs of the people living in society. So Kropotkin says that, quote, the sophism of the brain cannot resist the mutual aid feeling, because this feeling has been nurtured by thousands of years of human social life and hundreds of thousands of years of pre-human life in societies, end quote. This is the main thesis of Kropotkin. Having studied researched the different species, he points how there were in that time already many scientists that have saw how in the past there were systems of communality in different areas, and even he points to more contemporary examples like the Eskimo communities, some societies in Siberia that he saw there living in small communities and so on. And this is something that's also analyzed in the book about history by David Graeber and David Gengro, The Dawn of Everything, in which they point how there were many different societies in the world who had different kind of system. Other were based in slavery, but others were focused on the idea of the common aid. And Kropotkin points to some kind of replies that people do. And see, he mentions one example which goes like that. But what about these men who were drowned in the Serpentine in the presence of a crowd, out of which no one moved for their rescue, it might be asked? Or what about the child which fell into the Regent's Park Canal, also in the presence of a Holyrood crowd, and was only saved through the presence of mind of a maid who led out an Newfoundland dog to the rescue? So Kropotkin, who advocates for the goodness of human people and how changing the idea of society, giving power to the people, this will emancipate themselves and make them enhance their creativity, their freedom, the kind of idea to help other people, and so on. But obviously, these kind of questions we can extrapolate to our contemporary society, like, see, everybody's very selfish, so we need to take care of ourselves. So Kropotkin say the same. The answer is plain enough. Man, quote, is a result of both his inherent instinct and his education. Among the miners and the seamen, their common occupation and their everyday contact with one another create a feeling of solidarity, while the surrounding dangers maintain courage and pluck. In the cities, on the contrary, the absence of common interest nurtures indifference, while courage and pluck, which seldom find their opportunities, disappear or take another direction. End quote. Henceforth, the education, which for the anarchists is one of the main aspects to develop their ideas, is fundamental once again here. He is not trying to idealize the kind of society of the countryside in contrast with the city, but he points how in the cities there is also a chance to change society, because there are many people going up together, looking at each other and so on, but the idea is to change the way in which we are being approached, the kind of remaining just in our private sphere without caring among the others. So the idea of changing education is fundamental to understand that. And obviously the labor union, he points, it's the perfect example of the mutual aid. He mentioned how in the strikes, even though the police are shooting down the strikers on the slightest provocation or even without any provocation, and he points, people still shows this commitment to help everybody, to be part of a movement in order to change things. We can analyze nowadays the movements in Iran for women emancipation, how people are getting in prison. We have in Russia the people that have been captive because they refuse the invasion of Ukraine. We have in England the ecological activism that are protesting in a non-violent means, and hence in any way they are being put in jail and so on. So these people, they know that they are going to be captive, and still they are willing to go far away from to enhance their objectives. I'm watching a documentary about Extinction Rebellion, and it's interesting to hear their meetings, because they are saying that, okay, we know that we are going to be captive, we are going to be in jail, but this is part of the movement. So knowing what is going to happen, and yet they are willing to do so. It's like in Russia in 1905, when the people went front of the Winter Palace to protest, and they faced the military and the police, and obviously they had the weapons and they were massacred in thousands of people, and yet they were courage enough to do so. So Kropotkin makes a historical review how the repeal of the combinations law in 1825 was, the combinations law in 1825 were eliminated, which was a huge step to progress in society, but they were persecuted in 1830s. We have the movements in the Chartist movement in 1840s in England, the socialists in Germany, in Prussia, after Germany and so on, and different parts of the world, and how they always face the backlash of the established order, because the state knew how threatening were this movement, because they could be able to raise the consciousness of the people and therefore change the society. In that sense, a Bakunin, who was a contemporary of Kropotkin, a bit older than him, and he was let's say that the founding father of modern anarchism are Proudhon, which in 1840 wrote What is Property, one of his most important books, We have Bakunin, who was writing in the 1850s, 1860s, and Kropotkin a bit later, 70s, 80s. But Bakunin also shares these ideas of the state. And he says the next about how the violence forced by the state and the religion had been able to stultify society. He says, quote, "The state is authority, it is force, it is the ostentation and infatuation of force. It does not insinuate itself. It does not seek to convert." End quote. So it is a mechanism imposed there by the people in power in order to force society to obey their designs. And for that reason, Bakunin, Proudhon, Emma Goldman, Kropotkin, Durruti, Malatesta, and many other anarchists are willing to fight in order to establish a society in which there are no hierarchies. You have a kind of horizontal system to represent everybody. The people should have the different roles in order to contribute to society, and at the same time they will have freedom in order to progress. In fact, Bakunin, which in the episode about Noam Chomsky I quote some of his ideas in his books about the importance of liberty, he says again, quote, "Liberty, morality, and the human dignity of man consists precisely in this, that he does good, not because it is commanded, but because he conceives, wills, and loves it." So it is important to change the perspective of the people, because they will be able to help each other, not because they are forced to do that, because they really want to. And this seems utopian, but if you think in your daily life, think about your friends, your family, the people that you love most, and believe how these people can be, you are willing always to help them. And in that sense, it doesn't matter that you are being forced to do so, but rather because you want really to help them. Obviously, you have a special relationship with them, but the idea of anarchism is that your love or your kindness or your careness does not have just to be focused on one part of the world as a tiny section. I mean, you can be able to help other people. I mean, even in our societies, you are paying taxes. Probably you will never go to the hospital, but with the taxes that you are paying, let's say in Granada, maybe you will help that somebody in Vigo will be able to receive a treatment. So in this way, this is kind of anarchist idea, that you are willing to help everybody, people that you don't even know, in that sense, because you think that is the correct way to act, because you have empathy for the human beings and other animals and sentience. So, in that sense, coming back to Kropotkin, he points that societies were formed initially under the protection of the state or the church or a secret brotherhood, and like the Freemasonry and so on. But he points that in his contemporary world, the resistance has been broken. They swarm in all directions, they extend over all multifarious range of human activity. They become international, and they undoubtedly contribute to an extent which cannot yet be fully appreciated to break down the screens erected by states between different nationalities. So Kropotkin here is advocating for international solidarity, same as the Marxist ideology. In that sense, he points how the idea of preventing a European wars from 1871, which the last one was the Franco-Prussian War, he points that this was in part to the kind of international solidarity shown by the workers. The problem of this is that 12 years later, the First World War outbreak, and obviously all the international solidarity was literally destroyed. In fact, the Second International, which was founded some years before, it was crashed in 1914 because Marx and Engels had been advising for many decades, like the most important was to not get subjugated to the state, because the idea of the nation was very powerful, but still the workers and the people, the different classes, had to ally themselves in order to avoid obeying the orders of those on power. Unfortunately, when the Second World War, there was a nationalistic upsurge in many countries, and the international solidarity, it seemed to be destroyed for a while, from 1914 until 1917, 1918. After you have the Russian Revolution, which it was supposedly a spark to infuse the fuel in other countries more industrialized, like England, like Germany, and so on. There was a short attempt in Germany with the Soviet in Munich. There were the 2 red years in Italy, the 3 red years in Spain. But all of those movements were crushed by the police, and the only kind of communist movement that was surviving at that time was the Russian Revolution, which was hugely destroyed by the invasion of the White Army, the support of 16 countries, and the original idea of emancipation and equality was gradually being diminished. In that sense, here Kropotkin fell to, same as Marx and Engels, to believe that the international solidarity could overcome every obstacle, but nationalism was that powerful that many socialists were turned into fascists after the First World War. The main one being Mussolini, but basically there was a kind of a line between the Social Democrats. You had those that become communists, anarchists, the other fascists, and also those that continue Social Democrat. And 1914, which is the second edition of the book of Mutual Aid, it was a main point to crush the aspirations of the socialist movement in 1914, although this movement recovered later on. But it was important to understand how the different anarchist and socialist communist writers were trying to emphasize the importance of mutual aid among the global community, and yet the states were powerful enough through the media, through the indoctrination, to put in the head of the people in the country that the nation was the most important at all, and it was good to fight for it until the end. So, in that sense, Kropotkin has 2 other books, which are Fields, Factories, and Workshops, and the other is The Conquest of the Bread. I have not read the former, but the latter, yes. And he analyzed here that if production in society were more scientific and better organized, a comparatively small amount of quite agreeable work would suffice to keep the whole population in comfort. So in that sense, it would not be necessary to work as many hours as was at the time per day, but just working, I think he analyzed that 3-4 hours per day will be enough to have a kind of productive society without economic problems and so on. And this is something that is being studied even nowadays, the idea of reducing the working hours in order to give people more freedom in the public sphere, but which even will be more beneficent for everybody, even for the companies, because people cannot perform very well after many hours of pressure. In that sense, writing about Kropotkin, Bertrand Russell, which I have talked about him in other episodes, mentioned that say the same quote: even though Kropotkin somewhat exaggerate what is possible with our present scientific knowledge, it must be nevertheless be conceded that his contentions contain a very large measure of truth. In attacking the subject of production, he has shown that he knows what is the really crucial question. If civilization and progress are to be compatible with equality, it is necessary that equality should not involve long hours of painful toil for little more than the necessities of life, since where there is no leisure, art and science will die and all progress will become impossible. End quote. So this is important because if you have more free time, you can enhance your skills, and this at the end you will be more happy and society will be benefited for that and so on. So when I was talking about Hannah Arendt, this idea of how the automation of different works can change the human condition, because people will have more time free for kind of create new ideas or engage with each others. This will obviously modify how we act in the different societies, and this will be important to create a new epoch. So the conditions nowadays are there in order to do so. it is important just to implement these kind of measures. In that sense, speaking about Kropotkin, he points how there is to be no obligation to work, and all the things are to be shared in equal proportion among the whole population. So Kropotkin wants to make the work pleasant. In such a community as he foresees, practically everybody will prefer work to idleness, because work will not involve overwork or slavery, or that excessive specialization that industrialism has brought about. So you won't be alienated from your work, something that has been touched by Adam Smith, by Marx, and many other philosophers. Adam Smith pointed how it was necessary to divide the labor to be more productive, but also we needed more time in the public sphere. Adam Smith wrote this in The Wealth of Nations in 1776. Marx gave another contest in 1848 with the Communist Manifesto, with Capital later on, and so on. So, and Kropotkin, because he's seen how this technology is developing very fast, point how there will be a time in the future in which this will be very possible to do. And I think that 21st century is great because we have technologies at our hand. We will be able to do things to help society, like caring for our people, which, I mean, nowadays people are living longer than before, so it will be a great idea to reduce our working hours and spend more time taking care of the elder people and so on, or the youngest ones. So this idea to make different activities which will be helpful for the whole community, like going out and picking up food and so on, or cleaning and so on, things that can be split among different people. So in that sense, for just to finish the series about Peter Kropotkin, the last thing that I wanted to do, it was like a kind of a bit of conclusion. In that sense, it is important to add how these ideas of he obviously touches the idea of the hardness, which is often shown by the richer employers toward the employees. And he points how one feels inclined to take the most pessimistic view of human nature, but again, he doesn't blame on the rich classes. He blames the whole system of education, and thinks that if society, even the richest people, can be educated in a way to show more empathy, altruism, and so on, there can be a redistribution of wealth. And Bakunin precisely points in his book, goes and states how there will be a time in which the sons of the bourgeoisie, tired about the custom of their parents and so on, will be able to ally with the working class. And we saw that 1 century later in the French May 1968 and another students' movement, such as white people supporting the civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King. Also nowadays, men supporting women in feminist movements, heterosexual people joining the LGBTQ+ community. So we see an intersectional solidarity between different collective ethnic minorities and so on. And this is something that the anarchists were hoping that will happen in the future, and we see that it is precisely like that. So just to finish, I will say the last quote that Kropotkin says in his book says, quote, "Neither the clashing powers of the centralized state, nor the teaching of mutual hatred and pitiless struggle which came, adorned with the attribute of science, from obliging philosophers and sociologists, could weed out the feeling of human solidarity, deeply lodged in men's understanding and heart, because it has been nurtured by all our preceding evolution. What was the outcome of evolution since its early stage cannot be overpowered by one of the aspects of that some evolution, and the need of mutual aid and support which had lately taken refuge in the narrow circle of the family or the slum neighbors, in the village or the secret union of workers, reasserts itself again, even in our modern society, and claims it rights to be, as it always has been, the chief leader towards future progress. Such are the conclusions which we are necessarily brought to when we carefully ponder over each of the groups of facts." End quote. Henceforth, he was highly optimistic, gave some ideas to emancipate ourselves, education, freedom, engagement with different people, push for change toward the state, The anarchists believe that the state doesn't do good, same as the church, religion, as Eva Goldman points like some decades later. The three evils are the state, the church, and the capitalism, because the first one oppress yourself, the second stultify your mind, and the third leave you without possibility to survive, like taking your property and so on. So these three pillars are to be overthrown, but common idea of different communities and so on. And we see that it's happening in different moments of the world. So those ideas were not also utopian. There were some experiments that happened in the past, like the Paris Commune 1871, the Makhnovitsia in Ukraine 1919-1920, led by Nestor Makhno and the other peasants, the Barcelona in 1936-1937 with the CNT having the control of the city, all the workers and so on. All of these movements have been crushed by sheer force of the state, and even with the help of other powers. But nevertheless, the idea goes on. There are recent theories of anarchism like David Graeber that died in 2020. You have also Noam Chomsky, who's still alive and writing prominently about anarchism. And many people that you don't think that they are anarchists, they are in their daily life, such as helping a friend to repair, like say, a computer, or taking care of the other children, and so on. So anarchism is embedded in our own life. Obviously, the word has had negative connotations from genealogically. The genealogy of anarchism is interesting because apparently it started to be highly demonized after 1880s, because there was the assassination of the son of the Tsar in Russia, and apparently at that moment anarchism was being victimized. In 1866, I think that is the year, there is the high market bombing. The anarchists are accused, and there is a trial which was clearly manipulated by the powers to demonize them, but still anarchism has always tried to fall among that, giving a society in which there is an idea that the order is committed by the whole people and not by some powers on our top. So I hope that you have liked the 3 episodes of Kropotkin and mutual aid and some of his works. Please share some of your ideas, because the bibliography of anarchism is great. There is Daniel Guerin, Anarchism Theory and Practice. There is Emma Goldman, Anarchism and Other Essays, Bakunin, God and State. So you have books of literature from Percy Shelley, you have Leo Tolstoy and other people who were anarchists, and even in their literature they share their ideas. So interesting to take an eye of them. Thanks so much for listening to these episodes.